Yesterday I was in Memphis with bishops from across the church and folks from across the Diocese of West Tennessee as we ordained together Phoebe Ruff, who is the new bishop of West Tennessee. And it seems that whenever we ordain a bishop, right there at the center is our bishop, Michael Curry. And so I said, Michael, guess where I'm going tomorrow? He said, please say hello to the people of the Moose or something. He really enjoyed his visit with you, and he talks about it regularly. I've heard him talk about that place when he didn't even know I was listening. So he enjoyed his time with you and remembers you fondly. You've been through so much since I was last with you on a Sunday morning. I was here soon after the storm and was shown a little bit around while people here were still making sense of what was happening. And I was a little bit, discombobulated, if that's the right word, as I came onto the property, realizing that the ways I would normally have come in wouldn't work. And fortunately, Eric was there to call for me and welcome me in the proper way. So you've all been accommodating in your own homes, perhaps, but certainly also in the life here at the congregation. And you have been in the prayers of the rest of our diocese and the rest of our church, because whenever a tragedy of one sort or another happens, I find that when it happens in East Carolina, people are reaching out to us, asking us how they can be of help. And many people from across the church have sent money that we're just getting ready to distribute, and I expect some of it will likely come your way to help with some of the expenses that you have here with the building. The scriptures today, I think, are wonderful in a very particular kind of a way. The first story, the story of Saul, falling off his horse, except you notice there's no horse there. Have you ever seen the artwork that shows him falling off a horse in the face of this light that overwhelms him? But in the story, there's no horse. Pay attention to those kinds of things. It's kind of sometimes. But being stopped in his tracks by a bright light and hearing a voice whom he didn't recognize, and then learning about Ananias and going through a gradual yet rapid transformation. It wasn't suddenly with the light that all was clear and he was corrected and had changed his direction. No, it was more that the light stopped him. And then with the help of others who were followers of Jesus, he found his way onto the path. And it certainly wasn't sudden, because it took a while before other followers of Jesus were able to trust him, because they thought he was that guy who had persecuted them on the road. And here he was now trying to spend time with them and to learn from them about this Jesus whose people he had persecuted. So that's that sudden story of the light on the road that actually takes quite a bit of time to unfold. And then from the gospel, we have a story of Peter, who's often portrayed as the one who takes a step or two forward in boldness and then retreats again pretty quickly when his confidence leads him, and then forward again and backward again. And the contrast in two characters who are often held in contrast, the one whose conversion is described as having been very quick, and the other whose formation in faith takes a lifetime. One of the reasons I love this piece from John's Gospel that tells of Jesus' encounter after his resurrection with his followers is because of what I've come to call the moment of forgiveness that is offered to Peter. Do you remember in the story that we would have heard in the days before our Easter celebration of something that Peter did 3 times? Rejecting Jesus 3 times? In this story, it's almost as if he's forgiven 3 times. As he goes back and forth with Jesus, who says, feed my sheep, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. And somehow, whatever brokenness or sense of failure might have still lived with Peter as he reflected back on those recent days, I'm understanding would have been cleansed from him and taken from him. And that sense of forgiveness, that sense of being restored in relationship with the one whom he might have felt he had failed, whom he had denied. And so Peter is restored. I think in the stories of Saul, Paul, and Peter, we have some wonderful opportunities to find our own stories. Because some of us will have had those moments where something has happened suddenly, even if it's taken us a while to figure it out. Even if it's taken us a while to make sense afterwards. But maybe there's been that moment where God, or so we believe it to be God, has entered our lives and intervened and crossed our paths, and nothing is the same again. My pattern at early services is not to tell a lot of stories to expand on my point, so I will tell you some of the stories that I could from my own life. Of those moments when I became aware that something was happening, even though I might not have known until much later how it was God at work in my life, pointing me or re-pointing me in a new direction. Sometimes we've had those experiences, and sometimes we can connect more with Peter, who seems to move in starts and stops and a little bit of time and then a lot and then backwards. Sometimes in this Christian journey that we live, we hear strong voices that tell us how we ought to live our faith, how we ought to experience God, how we ought to know the presence of Jesus in our lives. Our presiding bishop, Michael Curry, has certainly offered us language, the way of love, rules for following a Jesus-centered life. Language he introduced the General Convention in 2018. That kind of language is out of the language of rule of life that many of us have followed in our whole life, and some in centuries before us. It's familiar language, but it might be new for us. It might be new to think about how it is that we do not just say yes once, expecting it all to be perfect, but we say yes perhaps every day, and wait as that formation continues and continues, and we are shaped more and more fully into God's image, and not only into our own human entity. Instead of the idea that there can be a single way for us to encounter Jesus and live a life of faith, I think these stories held together show people whose lives bear witness to the reality that there can be many ways, and that each of us is called simply to encounter God and be shaped by God and God's Holy Spirit in the way that we are called to do, and not worry if that path looks like or does not look like the path of someone else close to us or near to us. I won't ask for a show of hands, but there might be some of you in the congregation this morning who have been a pilgrim to a Cursillo weekend. In the Diocese of East Carolina, in some parts of our diocese, there's a strong tradition of Cursillo as one of those kinds of experiences where people can encounter the risen Lord in the midst of a community gathered for a weekend. But I know that whenever there's a Cursillo community in the diocese, there are often those who want to push the Cursillo community aside because they can't quite believe it would happen that way. Those who have been to Cursillo, those who have not been to Cursillo, can't really argue that one or the other is right or wrong, but simply in our lives, God can come to us in unique and wonderful ways. I think that's part of the story of Easter, part of the good news that we're called to celebrate, not just on a single day, but through a season, in fact, really through our whole life. Even in the midst of the season of Lent, the Sundays are understood as celebrations of the resurrection. We are called to be people who give thanks for and celebrate the reality that God brings new life every day, differently for each of us, but every day. It's good to be with you. I know some of you may stay afterwards and we can engage in more relaxed kind of conversation. Years ago, one of my sisters said to me that I was one of those few people who got to stand up in a public place and speak and not expect to be questioned. I don't take that for granted, and I try not to speak in a way that suggests that I'm the only one in the gathered community with ideas about how it is that God is at work in our midst. So perhaps we might speak about that a bit together after our worship. It's good to be with you, to be with you as your recovering continues, knowing how hard so many of you are working, as I said earlier, in your own lives and homes, but also in the life of this community. Later today, we will celebrate as a number of people attached to and involved in the life of this community will say yes publicly and renew their baptismal vows in the midst of the congregation and be confirmed and received. those of us who will gather with them then will do the same with them then, and renew our own vows and renew our commitment to the reality that God